Hey, I'm Duke on Twitch. If you want to support the channel and greensunzenith.com, you can find my Patreon, merch store, and singles store where you can buy singles through TCG Player or Card Hoarder in the video description. If you want to get in contact, you can also find all that info in the description below for things like donation deck lists or just wanting to reach out. Alright, let's get right into it. Hey, welcome back to Dukes on Twitch. Back today with a special guest as part of the Eternal Weekend Legacy deck techs, this time on Abzan Depths with Dennis Aufermann. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Aufermann.
Aufermann. Okay,
Aufermann.
very nice. A huge thank you for coming on. You were someone that I've definitely tracked on Twitter to have a lot of success with Depths decks. We're just talking before, and you were talking about having some previous experience starting off with sort of the green-black Depths decks in Legacy. What kind of pulled you towards Depths as a strategy in the format?
Yeah, basically I really like playing like mid-range combo or combo with a backup plan. And yeah, that's why I chose Depths in the end. It's also, I started playing Depths when Deathstrike was still legal. And I just couldn't stand all the Grixis Delver mirrors. And I looked for a deck that was just really good against Delver. And yeah, that's how I ended up there.
Very nice. How do you find it, I guess, in today's metagame, especially you were saying you had a pretty good Legacy scene locally that has monthly events with up to 60 or 80 players. How do you find Depths in those sort of metagames?
It's usually pretty good. I mean, we've got a few more control players than usual, I think, so that could be a problem. But overall, it's just like, yeah, Depth has a really high baseline power level, and even if your matchup is kind of bad, you can just win anyway sometimes.
Yeah, I do like that with Naya and Abzan Depths, you do have that backup plan of just kind of a fair creature kind of mid-range approach instead of going for the 2020 and kind of potentially losing everything as you go for that. So I can see the appeal of having, yeah, a combo in a deck where if your opponent might, tap out, you can just go for it. But if they're really targeting it, like holding up Wastelands or Karakas or something similar, you do just have these, the Reliquaries and Reclaimers that can beat down pretty quickly, which is nice. One thing I will just note is that in here we do have Blossoming Defense, which is just 3 copies of Legolas's Quick Reflexes, which is a card that I think a lot of Knight of the Reliquary players have liked on release when it was obviously spoiled. I believe it comes out on the 12th or potentially the 14th, Wednesday this week on MTGO in the treasure chests. But have you been able to get any copies in paper yet?
Yeah, actually, I have too many copies because when it was spoiled, I was pretty sure that it was only available in foil.
Okay.
Because it's in foil in these gift boxes. And there's also like search foils in collector boosters. And I pre-ordered a couple, and then afterwards someone told me, yeah, in the collector boosters, there are also non-foil versions. So I had to order new ones.
Very nice. Okay.
So
It's
anyone at Eternal Weekend needs like a copy or like a couple of copies in foil, I can provide.
very nice. Okay, very generous. It's always tricky with cards like this that seem super powerful on spoil, and then when you have a tournament only, a week or so after, not only to get copies of them, but also to test with them and see how it actually goes. Have you tested it all with it in paper?
Yeah, a little bit. The problem is I don't have a ton of control players like in my local, I wouldn't say local scene, but in a local friend group. So it was a bit hard, but I got in like a couple of matches. Has been promising. So yeah, not as much testing as I would have liked, but I think the card is good, and that's the reason I choose to play it for Eternal Weekend.
Yeah, it seems like it should be really strong, and it seems like it fits really well in a deck with creatures that also have relevance of being able to untap, like Elvish Reclaimer, or Knight. And of course, split second hexproof just seems really, really powerful in a Dark Depths deck, because a lot of the known ways to deal with it in things like Karakas or Swords to Plowshares or Submerge potentially kind of get hosed by this card, and there's nothing your opponent can really do about it.
Yeah, that, and it also opens up, for example, versus Delver. You usually you would try to play your Reclaimer when it's bolt proof, and with reflexes you can just run it out on turn 2, even if it's still small. If they're bolted, you reflex it, and you can probably untap with it. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you think you might have like crop rotation open to go get Sejiri Steppe that could get dazed. But of course, split second means like you don't even have to worry about counter magic. You just know it's going to resolve, which, yeah, is a pretty incredible feeling, and a feeling that I hope a lot of Delver players over the next few weeks feel quite hard. But yeah, looking at your on MTGO experience, it's been really good. I wanted to point out that this year you actually, near the end of last year, you won a challenge with Dryad Depths, which is very cool to see. Was this your first win of a challenge, or have you won a challenge with previous decks?
No, that was the first win. I top 8'd a couple of challenges in the time before, but that was the first time I actually got there.
Very nice. I could see previously to that you had a sixth place, an eighth place, and since then you've obviously had some other finishes, which is great to see. And then yeah, on July 1st, I can see we've moved over to Abzan. Was there a key reason why you wanted to try out Abzan over Naya, which had obviously been doing quite well in the metagame and doing quite well for you as well, putting up strong results? I would assume Bowmasters is kind of the reason most people tried Abzan as a shell. But yeah, I can see for a list that you have here, we have things like the One Ring, which is very cool.
Yeah, actually, the One Ring version was also fine. Was basically I took my Naya list, added, swapped. I played Punishing Fires before in Naya Depths. I just swapped Punishing Fires, not on Magic Online.
Okay.
I think so. I played it in paper. And I just swapped the Punishing Fires for Orcish Bowmasters, and then looked for a replacement for Minsk and Boo. And the One Ring was like, yeah, it's a really good grindy 4-drop, and just went with it. I tried it before in paper, and it was actually pretty strong. But I think, yeah, in the end, it's not really where we want to be.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It kind of opens up like a different, a different line. Doesn't really like line up like with your 2020 or with like developing your board through creatures, but it obviously is a great way to draw cards, and a pretty efficient way to do it as well. But I tend to see with the Black Splash, Orcish Bowmasters is the big one. Sometimes we see Grist, which I saw in your top 16 place finish. You had a Grist in the main deck. And then Thoughtseize in the board is just sort of one mana interaction with potentially combo decks or control decks or even some mid-range decks.
Yes. Especially right now, because like Pyroblast isn't at its best. Because like the control decks, their threats are mostly non-blue right now. And Delver is starting to cut down on Murktides. You've got Blue-Black Scam, which is playing Troll, which doesn't get hit by Pyroblast. So I don't think you really need it right now.
Yeah, I've definitely lost some games where my opponent has had Troll on board and I've had Blast in hand, or even against control decks when they go for like a 4th Aerolingus and yeah, Pyroblast, you're like, this isn't how it was supposed to line up. This isn't what I planned, but yeah, I think Thoughtseize is really nice, even as a way to get turn 1 information to know how to build out the rest of your plan, which is really nice, especially in a deck with things like Gaddock Teeg. Like, do I need to like Green Suns for Gaddock Teeg straight away, or do I have time to like set up like kind of the combo side of the deck? Thoughtseize,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think providing a lot of information is really good for a Green Suns deck. even a crop rotation deck. Like knowing when to hold up crop rotation is pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, I got to love Thoughtseize when I played Reliquary in Depths, so
Nice.
just happy to be back there again.
Yes. Elvish Spirit Guide is actually one I haven't seen. I have seen Spirit Guide pop up in some mono green Cloud Post decks, ones especially that are adopting the One Ring. How have you found Spirit Guide in Abzan Depths?
It was really bad. Like really
Okay.
bad.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I won a couple of games despite having Spirit Guide, not because of having Spirit Guide.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, Spirit Guide's always tough because it seems like it's going to be really good when you look at it on paper. Like play around days, potentially get like out a 3-drop early on. Like always hold up crop rotation no matter how you tap. But then sometimes, you know, you're looking for something off the top and you draw a Spirit Guide. You're like, why is this in the deck? Yeah.
Yeah, I played Spirit Guide back when I played like black-green slow depths. I played like 3 Moxes and 3 Spirit Guides and just wanted to try it again. But
Yeah.
it doesn't play well with, for example, Knight of the Reliquary.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. Cool to see you try it though. I do love that. And then I guess we have your deck here, which seems to be the deck that you're pretty happy to take towards Eternal Weekend.
Yep.
Very nice. Just kind of off the top of your head, are there any kind of matchups you feel safer on with Abzan than Naya?
Yeah, basically all the combo decks where Pyroblast isn't good.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty close actually.
Yeah.
Maybe with 8 cast because of the Bowmasters. So that's the reason I'm not playing Tower of the Magistrate right now.
Yeah, very nice. That's actually a great point. It's really nice as well that a lot of decks with things like Swords, Plowshares, or Lightning Bolt, which typically might go after your Reclaimers or Knights, that also play Brainstorm, probably now have to go towards your Bowmasters, which is great because I feel like Depths doesn't really care about Bowmaster. It's great when it interrupts, but it's not really like the way we're going to win the game or really part of our initial strategy, which was potentially the reason why at the very start when I started seeing the lists come about, I was like, splashing for Bonemaster is cool, it's very relevant, but it doesn't really do anything for the deck. But then little things started happening, like I started playing it, and like Bowmaster would just be, you know, nuts against Brainstorm, especially Brainstorm decks with Bolt, because once you get a 4/4 token, it's quite hard to deal with for that deck. Even having the token means you kind of play around Sheoldra's Edict, which was a card that I was having a bit of an issue with, which is nice as well. Doesn't often happen. But you don't lose too much by dropping red. Obviously, Minsk is really powerful. And as you said, Pyroblast can be really powerful in the right metagame. But it feels like, although Abzan does splash for cards like Bowmaster, which aren't aligned with the 2020 or like the kind of mid-range plan, it's just so good and so relevant that it's worth playing, and it's obviously put up good results so far in challenges and other events.
Yeah, definitely. Like Bowmaster is just generically good card. It doesn't interact or it doesn't synergize with the rest of the deck, but it's just good enough.
Yeah, it's never, yeah, I've never been a player who's been able to get like 2-for-1s that much, but when your Bowmaster takes out a DRC, you get a token, and then they have to bolt the Bowmaster to start, you know, using their cantrips. It's just like a little bit of value that you don't usually feel that is really nice for the deck. Would you say Abzan has any big weaknesses to it that potentially Naya didn't have?
I don't know if it's a weakness, but I feel a bit soft versus Ensnaring Bridge, because before I just instant would to throw a token.
Yes.
It's lacking right now, but I mean, there are a couple of painter players who play a bridge, but other than that, I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's very true. I think the only minor thing sometimes on Naya that was nice is that if my opponent played an early Blood Moon and didn't have too much else, Minsk wasn't too hard to get onto the field under a Blood Moon, costing just pretty much a green, which you had access to through Mox Diamond, and sometimes you could, if you could find your forest, which was nice. But same sort of thing. Artifacts and enchantments can be a little bit tough. This version seems like it's very game one. I kind of care about my game plan with a little bit of interaction and things like Swords, Plowshares, Orc, Crop for things like Bojuka Bog or Karakas if you need to and not use them for the combo. But no kind of one-off Green Suns targets like Endurance or Ramanap or Outland Liberator. The Teague in there is just like a really nice Green Suns target, especially against combo and control to some extent, especially if they're playing Fourth Lingus. It shuts off not just removal and board wipes, but also potentially their win cons. I've seen some lists run Collector Ouphe in the main deck over Teague, but I assume here you're a big fan of Teague, especially seeing the two more in the sideboard.
Yeah,
Teague.
definitely. Yeah. I mean, my problem with main deck Green Suns targets is basically in game one you don't know what you're playing against, and it's hard to, for example, Green Suns Fatigue in the dark. And so I just say, okay, game one, I want to focus on my game plan, just be as consistent as possible, and then switch it up for game 2 and 3.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. There are some games against things like Elves where you have the Collector Ouphe in hand if you're playing Ouphe, or you're playing against a deck like, say, Jeskai Control that might have a lot of basics and you draw the Ramanap, where it's just like, you don't really want to play it. You'd probably rather do something else, but then you're kind of down a card. So it is really nice just going, hey, I only care about what I'm trying to do in game one, and then post-board I'll have a better understanding of what I need to have in my main deck 60. And kind of refreshing. I think it's really cool to see players trying out new things, because I think once you see like a Green Suns package in Depths, you think, okay, that makes sense. And then you kind of just roll with it. And then you see a lot of lists rolling with it as well. So it is kind of cool where you've gone, okay, Safekeeper is obviously great for combo. I want to have that because it protects both like the mid-range plan, protecting my little creatures, and the Dark Depths plan of just protecting it itself. And then Teague, it's like, well, Teague's just a really nice way to make sure I care a little bit about some of the combo decks in the format, or even some of the more control-y decks. But yeah, it's a very sort of like clean list. You can tell that someone who plays this just wants to kind of do their thing.
Yeah, you could say like Green Suns in that list is a bit more like Ponder for consistency, and a bit less like Demonic Tutor, maybe.
Yeah, I like that. That's very cool. Yeah. That's actually a great way to put it. The one card that I guess does make sense with how you're kind of building this deck out for Eternal Weekend is Grist, which I think is just like a really powerful Planeswalker, especially off Green Suns. Is there a reason why you moved away from it in the full 75?
So basically, the cards I cut for Legolas's reflexes were Grist, fourth Mox, and the second step. And actually, I've been quite disappointed with Grist. It's great when you're at parity or when you're ahead, but it's like doesn't do enough versus control, because like control decks, you make a token once per turn, and then they fourth lingers you and you die, or they just out card draw you. And versus Delver, it can be nice, but you need a board presence if you want to Green Suns for it, or you need a clean board, and it's also kind of clunky. So it's just really situational.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think against Delver, when you have a clean board, it's very hard not to just Green Suns for a Knight, because that obviously turns on your combo, and it also is just usually a massive threat for them to deal with. I do really like that you've cut the second step, because I think there was a pretty funny kind of cycle where players didn't really respect the second step, and then they started respecting the second step, and now you can kind of take the second step out, especially with the Legolas's quick reflexes. But I feel like some players would still think you have a second in the deck and play around it to some extent, even if you only have the one.
Yeah, probably.
It's kind of like being scared of like Stifle or Daze, where you just kind of expect at least one in certain shells, and I think players are getting around to Depths just always automatically having two.
Yeah, that could definitely happen. But it was mostly, I really like the second step, but I think with reflexes, it would be a bit of overkill.
Yeah, especially having kind of too many spells in the deck, or I should say non-creature spells. You can get in situations where you really want to have a threat on board and your hand's just kind of reactive, reactive cards, which isn't a great feeling. Is there a metagame you think will be at Eternal Weekend, or are there any decks that you're really trying to focus on beating, like say a top 4 or top 6?
Yeah, well, I think the metagame would be, at least the winners metagame will be similar to Magic Online, but of course, it's a large paper tournament. You have people who just, for example, own Sneak and Show.
Yes.
Then they will come and play Sneak and Show. Well, the decks I'm focusing on with that list are mostly the control decks, because I think they will be a huge part of the metagame, and current like 4-color control is actually a really tough matchup. At least for the classic lists. The other lists that will run around are like Delver, Scam, but I think we're pretty good with Delver and Scam, so that's fine. Initiative is a problem, definitely, but I hope reflexes will help, but I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I think reflexes being removal as well is pretty key in some of those matchups like Initiative or like Delver, because most lists, other than Endurance having Reach, you don't have a great way to interact with flyers other than straight removal. So having pseudo Swords to Plowshares 5 to 7 is pretty nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially in a deck where you don't want to run too much removal. I see the Assassin's Trophies in the board, which are really nice because they hit anything from Delver to Murktide to Titan. Oh, sorry, the Troll.
Yeah, I would be pretty uncomfortable playing like less than 6 answers for Murktide or for Troll.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say blocking it is the easiest thing to do. Sometimes you can buy a turn, but usually you're losing all 3 creatures, if not at least 2 of them.
Yeah, also like resolving 3 large creatures on time versus today's Wasteland deck, it sounds a bit hard.
Yes, that's very true.
Like versus initiative, for example, you said removal could help, but the problem is like their slow hands are actually fine if they just play whatever, like a Fable and then dawdle around. That are the games I can actually win, but if they go like turn 2 initiative creature and just kill me, it's pretty hard.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, obviously, like, we have a fair bit of graveyard hate in the board in Endurance and Surgical, which is nice. Are you a fan of bringing in Surgical and Thoughtseize against namesake decks, like Doomsday or Sneak and Show, decks like that? Or do you think... I'm always on the fence. I'm always on the fence if, like, Thoughtseize Doomsday Surgical or Thoughtseize Show and Tell Surgical is really where I want to be. Like, it seems like a cool thing to do, but it is 2 cards for 1, typically. And you don't often get that lineup as well. You don't always have the Thoughtseizers with the Surgicals or vice versa.
Versus Doomsday would probably bring it in because the matchup is so bad that I will do just anything that could work.
Yeah.
Even like just shuffling the Doomsday pile to buy a turn.
Yeah.
Could do something. First, Sneak and Show, probably not. I mean, obviously bring in Thoughtseize, but since they've got both Show and Tell and Sneak Attack, I mean, you could extract one, then they just draw the other.
Yes.
Probably not good enough.
Yeah. And I think there's a fair amount of cards in the main deck that you just keep in versus Sneak as well. You're not really looking to bring in sort of anything and everything that has text on it. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, Sneak Attack's like the only spell-based combo deck where I'll keep in Swords to Plowshares just in case they've got like a Magus of the Moon.
Yeah. Yeah, Sneak's just one of those decks where I feel like it always pops up at big events because people who have it in paper, as you said, just love to play it. And although there is a winner's metagame, especially online, not everyone has the resources to switch decks for what they currently own in paper to another one and learn it and become proficient with it. That, yeah, I think it's quite hard to always kind of navigate what a metagame is going to be. And so I think there's a real advantage in a deck like Depths, which just has that win con of like, if you're going to, take a few turns to set things up, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to crush you with the 2020, which is really nice. That's something Maverick kind of misses, is that it doesn't have that I win button in Depths.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say I'm like comfortable whenever I get like more than 3 turns to play.
Yes. Yeah. Get a little bit of setup on your end. How do you find Death and Taxes?
I don't see it a ton, but I've always liked the matchup. It's like, first, it's super interesting to play. And I mean, I've never played against the real Death and Taxes masters like Extract Cloud or Luinil, but I feel comfortable with the average Death and Taxes player I will meet in paper or like online.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones because I know Michael Mapson is also a big fan of it when he's played Naya Depths, and it's tricky because on paper it looks like D&T has all the answers. You have Wasteland and Port to some extent, Karakas, Solitude, Stoneforge Mist, Swords Plowshares, like Flicker Wisp, not just being a way to interact with your token, but being like a flyer with Mother of Runes. They have a quick clock with like Stoneforge and Cauldra, but some of the times I find that Sylvan Safekeeper is just the best card you can have, because it's very hard for them to deal with a 2020 once you have the Safekeeper in play and a little bit of mana to play around with.
Yeah, definitely. Like Safekeeper plus enough lands is your end game. It's a bit hard to navigate because you have to make sure that you don't die to an early Cauldra.
Yes.
And if you get past that, you have to kill them before they assemble like their Yorion loops, because those you can beat as well. So you have to pick your spot in the mid game, and yeah, it's actually very possible to win. Thing you have to do is obviously destroy their vial or shut it off with Ouphe, because I think you have to constrict them on their mana because they have so many answers. You have to make sure that they can't deploy all of them.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point. And I feel like D&T these days can sometimes struggle on white mana without Vial, which is pretty interesting to say about a monocolored deck. But I feel like there's a few monocolored decks in Legacy where, because they're monocolored, they try to add a bunch of things like Wasteland or Port or Saga, and just find a few turns where they have like a few 2 white mana spells but only have the 1 white source.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for example, for that reason, I'm at least the last couple of times I played versus Texas, I did not bring in Trophy because giving them a Plains is just too strong for them.
Yes. Yeah, there's nothing worse than having like a Path to Exile as an answer for an early Mum, or even Stoneforge, because you just don't want to give them that mana. Not just the ramp, but also the second white is just crucial.
Yeah, that's something I learned when I played Black-Green Turbo Depths back in the day, when you had Ghost Quarter instead of Wasteland, and just Ghost Quartering Texas was so bad.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. Are there any, like, would you say there's anything a player might miss by not knowing kind of how to play a Depths deck by looking at it from like a top-down perspective? Are there any things that players might miss? Or are there things you've done in Depths and then players have gone, oh, I didn't expect that, or oh, I didn't know the deck could kind of pivot that way?
Oh, it's a tough question. I think most newer players, or a lot of newer players, including myself, missed at the beginning how important it is to use Flagstones to ramp yourself. Just, I've played a ton of mirrors where my opponents were just searching up wastelands in the early game and doing all the utility land stuff instead of just developing a mana advantage. I think that's pretty important
Yeah,
in
it's a great
most
one.
matchups.
Yeah, especially with Reclaimer also finding any land is pretty key. There's been times where I've definitely put an emphasis on getting Reclaimer first over anything else against like a Blood Moon deck, just because it can turn other lands into your basics if you don't find them before then.
Yeah, definitely. Reclaimer is the best card in the deck, hands down.
Yeah, but yeah, it's funny because I feel like a few times against opponents, I've played the turn one Reclaimer, and then they've kind of been like, "Oh, okay, what's coming turn two?" And you just sort of play a land and pass, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that's actually kind of scary as well." Like, just the ability to ramp, especially if that second land is Flagstones naturally.
Yeah.
That's always a really nice one. Sylvan Library is also a card that I really enjoy, especially as a turn one play off a Mox. And I think that the Abzan version is a little bit more prepared for Orcish Bowmasters, just because you have your own Orcish Bowmasters and your own instant speed way to deal with them before library occurs, which is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. But also in a lot of Bowmasters matchups, for example, Grixis Delver, I'd board out Library anyway, so it doesn't come up that often.
Yeah, that's a great point. And in the matchups where it stays, usually the more mid-range games, like lands, I'm a big fan of Library being there. I think Library's a really strong card to have, especially in your opening turn. Even in the mirrors, I find if you get down an early Library, you don't really care what your life total is. Usually you play around with it a little bit, but sometimes there's no real difference in there being, 20 points to your life total or 4 points. Sometimes your opponent can step their way through, which never feels good. But yeah, Library just, I feel like although there's a lot of answers to it these days, once you untap with it, it's just, yeah, it's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, it's also like the best card to provide card selection for the deck because a lot of your draws are a bit weird when you draw like the wrong end of your utility lands or not enough creatures, and Library is just nice to smooth out your draws.
Yeah, great point. Especially extra Moxen that you might not want, or you want to keep the Bojuka Bog or the Step in the deck. There's nothing, worse than your plan being to crop for it and then you draw it. So yeah, I think
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Sylvan Library, a little bit like Ponder, just gives you that ability to control what you're drawing, which typically you don't have in these colors, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, even for like, game one against the Delver deck, it's just nice to be able to even like look at the top three for a removal spell. You don't always have to pay, so there's
Yeah, and
definitely some
also
advantages.
versus Bowmaster's deck, if you've got a library in play, you just draw your first card, set it aside, and then the trigger happens. And if they Bowmaster you, you just can decline the trigger, depending on
Yes,
your life total.
yes, that's a really good one. Yeah, with I guess Delver is probably going to be the deck at Eternal Weekend. I think most players in paper who own Delver have a pretty easy time moving towards the splash of black. Potentially, like getting access to Underground Seas could be a bit of an issue, but I would assume Grixis Delver, if not like Rug with Hooting Mandrills and Up the Beanstalk, could be interesting takes. What do you sort of do against the Delver decks? You spoke about Library, and I assume Teague isn't really the hate bear you want.
Yeah, I look at libraries, Teaks, and usually the Karakas. I mean, it's fine as just as a white source, but other than that, it's not really good. And I'll just bring in the trophies and the 2 endurances.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, endurance. I think a big thing about endurance, especially, is a lot of the time casting it on your opponent's turn is incorrect. You should just cast it at sorcery speed when they're tapped out, or they haven't been able to brainstorm in response. There's been a lot of times where I've wanted to get my opponent with like getting them to attack with a creature and then casting the endurance, but when they have some sort of interaction, it always feels like I could have just done it on my turn. I wouldn't have got the kill, but I also would have kept the creature at bay, so it kind of does similar things.
Yeah, definitely. And also, if they are like near casting a Murktide, you should just nuke their graveyard.
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah.
like, I don't know what other players do, but I tend to very aggressively Bojuka Bog my Devo opponents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how there's been a lot of times where my opponent has had a DRC in play and I've bogged them, and then the following turn they've had Delirium just off like a fetch land, a bauble, and like a ponder. And it's just, yeah, it's crazy how fast that deck can get their graveyard online, or even get it back online after something like a bog. But I really like the aggressive bogging.
Yeah.
Would you say Bowmasters is typically a sorcery speed card?
Oh, it depends. Well, oftentimes versus Delver, you have like a Reclaimer in play, and if my opponent plays a creature, I'll Bowmasters it. But I tend, in a lot of times, I tend to, for example, not play it into a cantrip because my Reclaimer activation is just more important.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a good level up as well. Just knowing that, like, although you can cast the Bowmasters and it probably will have an effect on the board, sometimes just the power of Reclaimer is so good, especially with Flagstones, as we were talking about before.
Yeah. And also, I think versus Delver, you were talking about Dragon's Wrath Channeler. I think the small creatures in your reflexes are just not an issue at all.
Yes.
Because you can use like these really disgusting turns when you've got a large Reclaimer. You just reflexes it, block one creature, tap it, shoot down another creature. It's just really disgusting for Delver.
Yes. Yeah. I can't wait for it to come online. And it will be interesting to see where it goes. If it stays in depths, if it sees play in other decks. I know that Furnace Cloud was a fan of it in Infect, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it obviously seems really powerful and great in any sort of green creature deck, but potentially not ones that are a little bit more combo focused, like elves, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard you when you were doing the Maverick deck tags, talking about in Maverick, but is it really that interesting for Maverick? Because you're not. Are you caring about a single creature surviving?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think Mother of Runes has kind of been in and out of lists lately, and that's not just because of things like Orcish Bowmaster. It's, yeah, in my opinion, also because there's not really one threat you care about enough these days. Like even Athalia isn't as good as she was 10 years ago. It's crazy to say 10 years ago as well, but it actually has been 10 years. Or even Gaddock Teeg for that instance. Like sometimes Teeg, like sometimes the issue with Teeg that I find is that a lot of blue decks have Dress Down, and that's a really hard card to fight. I think the only way you can fight against it is something like a Pyroblast on the stack. And even then, it's, you have to have the Pyroblast when they have the Dress Down. That doesn't always line
Basically,
up.
Pyroblast on the stack, or like Force of Vigor, or
Yes.
Assassin's Trophy, but you probably wouldn't bring them in versus a Dressed-on matchup.
Yeah. But I will be interesting to see. I'll be interested to see people who test out quick reflexes in Maverick, if they have any sort of conclusive evidence on if it's made a certain matchup better, or if there is a creature they typically try to keep alive. Yeah, I really like it in depths and even Infect, because it does seem like a card you're going to cast and then win probably the next turn potentially. Or at least have the option to do that. In Maverick, you don't typically have that. You're kind of playing for the longer game. You don't have like an easy way to get to victory. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if it gets played and then doesn't get played. I could definitely see that happening, especially in a deck like Maverick where you want a really high creature count, and the card's got to be really good to be a non-creature card in a creature saturated deck.
Yep.
3 Teague. You love Teague. Tell me about Gaddock
Yeah,
Teague.
I love Teague. I'm a big Teague fan. Well, I started playing Teagues when that mono black Besiege Helm deck came up, because Teague is really good with them, but your Green Suns Zeniths are kinda unreliable because they are playing for opposition agent.
Yes.
And I just added more Teagues to be able to draw it naturally. And also it's like it's the best plan versus control I could come up with. Like versus control, if they don't have to rest down, Teague plus Safekeeper shuts down most of their stuff.
Yeah.
But if you just have one Teague, one Safekeeper, it puts a real strain on your Green Suns. You could basically need to draw 2 of them to assemble it. And having more Teagues just makes it more likely.
Yeah, I love that thought, because I never thought of adding more of a Green Sun's target because of cards like Opposition Agent if you do expect them against a deck like the one you're targeting in Mono Black Besiege, which makes a ton of sense. Even something like Grafdigger's Cage has come up every now and then as like a Saga target, which is annoying, especially against the decks where you don't expect it and you don't bring in something like Artifact or Enchantment Hate. So having
Yeah,
the
definitely.
extra Gaddock Teeg is really nice.
Also with the combo decks where Teague is good, you have to have it on turn 2, and yeah, drawing naturally makes it more likely.
Yeah, definitely. Like you could have the turn 1 Mox for a turn 2 Zenith, but typically if you're green sunning for Zenith against a combo deck, it's probably turn 3 at best. Because turn 1 you're probably doing something like a Thoughtseize, hopefully. The other thing as well is that I've definitely found a bit of a switch on how people interact with Gaddock Teeg on the field. And in previous experiences, I've found that like an end step destroy Teeg untap combo off has changed a little bit because of cards like Karakas, where they just want to deal with the card straight away in their turn, let you have another turn, and then try to go off in their next turn. A little bit like what you see with Delver sometimes against Thalia, that rather just not let you play a Karakas and hold that up. So if your opponent is someone who is going to sorcery speed, destroy Teeg, let you have a turn, then try to go off the following turn, it's nice to have those extra Teegs to actually put on the field on that following turn.
Yeah, also it could work out with control, because most control players probably don't think I have a second Teague if they plow the first one.
Yeah.
So that could work as well.
Yeah, no one expects a second Teeg. So I can assure you, no one expects the third Teeg.
Probably not.
No. But yeah, that's cool. I think Gaddock Teeg has been interesting in how it's kind of played out over the last few years, because it definitely went out of contention. It wasn't really seen as like a legacy hate bear to the same standard as it once was in sort of the top Miracles era, but it's definitely come back. Even against like some of the natural order decks, it's really nice to have, because typically their Green Suns as well is better for them. And obviously turning off natural order is a huge bonus as well.
That's good against a couple of random things, I would say. And also, I would like to talk a bit more about the control matchup, because I think in the past, the depth list tried to play like singular threats that would go over the top of control. For example, Minsk and Boo when control was still Jeskai, so they couldn't ending a Minsk if they didn't bring in, or they couldn't remove from Minsk if they didn't bring in Hydroblast. Or stuff like, what's it called? That 5-mana enchantment that makes fractal tokens. Paradox Zone.
Paradoxulacum.
Paradox Zone, yeah.
Paradox Zone, sorry.
And
yes.
the thing is, right now, control decks have really good draw engines like the Ring and or Beanstalk, and they are playing Leyline Binding, so they can pretty much answer everything you do. So you can't. I don't think you can try to go over the top of them. And with Teague, yeah, my plan is to basically sidestep stuff, shut off a couple of things, and then try to kill them before they find an answer. Because
Yeah.
like go over the top thing just hasn't worked for me.
Yeah, that's a great insight, especially against control. Swords on your first Teague, or usually your only Teague, really sucks. So having backup Teagues, that makes me feel really good inside, especially knowing you still have them in the deck. That's always really nice. Because yeah, I think that's like a little advantage. I don't think many people in this build especially wouldn't expect not having the second step. Control players wouldn't expect 3 Teague. And I think there's probably also a benefit of playing new cards like Legolas's quick reflexes, which I assume the majority of players will be aware is now in the format, but I'm sure you'll get some players who will have to read it and probably even call a judge, asking like, can I do something in response, or is this really how
Yeah,
it works,
probably.
or which is nice. It's kind of nice to be the deck that gets access to that card because it's obviously very powerful, and it is a card that I think some people would question. So
Yeah, it
that's
might.
always really nice.
Yeah, also, for example, a control player could get fancy, and when they have 2 answers up, just try to play them both on my turn, and then reflexes just get them. Could happen, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the other thing is that I think players might think of control, might think of Teague, ways to deal with it. Karakas is another like clean way to deal with Teague, but we also run Wasteland, and they don't typically have too many great targets for Wasteland, especially post board. I usually find control mages, if they can, try to get their mana online just through basics early on. Just make sure they can cast all their spells. Some do opt just to go all in on jewels, which is fine, but I feel like typically if they have the Karakas, we probably have access to the Wasteland as well to answer that,
Yeah, probably.
hopefully. Any tips for anyone picking this deck up, potentially wanting to play it at Eternal Weekend?
Yeah, I would suggest they should watch your videos, probably.
Too kind. Nice.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a pretty hard deck to just pick up spontaneously.
Yeah. I think one big thing for me is kind of not just knowing in each sort of matchup if you traditionally go towards the mid-range plan or the combo plan, if you want to be like fast in the combo deck, but kind of thinking about that every turn. And like if you are on the mid-range plan and then seeing that your opponent is getting ahead, like knowing kind of how to change that towards the combo plan. Like there have been some matchups against, say, Death and Taxes, where it's like, okay, we can play a bit of a mid-range plan here. And then a lot of the creatures get additional value when they come into play, so they start getting all these cards in hand. It's like, okay, we now need to kind of close this game out before they really go over the top. A little bit like the One Ring. The One Ring's a big one as well. You can have a nice mid-range plan. They play the One Ring, they start drawing a bunch of cards, and then you're like, okay, we need to close this game out before they can actually cast all those cards, or else we're probably
Yeah,
not winning this
definitely.
game.
And the problem with depths is, like, for example, if you're playing a Delver deck, you can switch gears really fast. And with depths, or for example, if you're playing depths or lands, for example, it's like, yeah, you're a bit slower to switch gears, and you have to choose what you're doing, and then you have to follow it through over the next couple of turns. And if you choose wrong, you've got a problem.
Yes. Yeah, I think we have the benefit that our beaters in Reclaimer and Knight can also tutor up the combo if needed, which is obviously a nice little
Yeah.
plus. I've always been a big fan of the 5 jewels, 2 basics as well. I think the second Bayou especially is really strong. It's just like another black source, but also another green source to get the rest of your mana online.
Yeah,
Have you ever
it's
moved
also
to?
another. Sorry, it's
No,
also another land you can sack tonight, because I think I have run out of lands to sack tonight before.
yes. Yeah, unless you have Yavin play, which is usually a little bit Christmas land. It does come up. But yeah, that's definitely happened to me as well, where I've even gone to fetch and I haven't found a land because I've been aggressively using Knight. That can be a little bit awkward as well. But I do like your choice in Verdant because it still fetches Dryad Arbor and then it gets Scrubland on top of the other dual lands. Like a Wooded
Yeah,
Foothills obviously would not find the Scrubland.
no, I have tried out Notch and Peatland in that slot, but Yeah, because sometimes depths just floods out a bit, but it basically never came up. And yeah, I think in the end I value having white mana and having a land that can search up your basic or sec to night a bit higher.
Yes. Nice. Can I ask, do you have a custom Dark Depths token, or do you use just the one produced by Wizards of the Coast?
I just use the Cold Snap one.
Nice. Okay, cool. Okay, nice. The original. I like it. I like it. Nice. I think we've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover, which is really cool. The list looks super clean, which I really like. A lot of 3-ofs. For the 1-ofs, like even Collector Ouphe, you obviously have multiples in Green Suns. Yeah, it looks like a deck that's been built by someone who obviously has a pretty good idea of what their plan is against each matchup, which is cool. And I definitely appreciate, I believe a little while ago you put out a sideboard guide for Abzan. Obviously not this build, this 75, but it's a good one to look at just to get like a general idea of how players who have got the reps with Abzan do sideboard against different decks.
Yeah, I would have to like rework it a bit because it's like 2 months old right now. But yeah, a lot of people asked for it, and especially in the Depths Discord. And I had a couple of hours of spare time and just decided, yeah, probably should write something.
Nice, that's very cool. Love that. Nice, Dennis. Yeah, a huge thank you for joining me for this. I'm sure some people will, really enjoy listening to this and getting some prep info for Eternal Weekend. Are you going to be playing in the European one?
Yeah, definitely. I will play the main event, and not sure what I will do on Sunday after that, but yeah.
Very cool. Have you played an Eternal Weekend before?
No.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
It's quite long on day one, isn't it? There's a lot of rounds.
It's probably 10 rounds.
Yes. Okay. Nice. Well, my only tips are stay hydrated, walk between rounds, and nuts. Nuts are a good source of, staying not too hungry.
Yeah, I mean, I've played 9 or 10 round tournaments before, but for example, like Four Seasons or
Yes.
the MKM series when it was still a thing. But yeah, Eternal Weekend, due to COVID, not allowing for large tournaments, I never managed to get there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am assuming this Eternal Weekend coming up will be pretty close, if not a sellout, especially for Europe. I feel like Europe has a lot of pretty big legacy communities like that in Italy that'll most likely be traveling for the event.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we've overall got a pretty good legacy scene in Europe.
Nice. Do you have a local game store that you play Legacy at?
No.
Okay.
Like, we've got a local game store in Cologne, but they don't really support Legacy.
Okay.
And a couple of people tried like making hosting a tournament over there, but yeah, it was like 8 to 10 people. It's difficult.
Yeah, that's very true. You're going to get that with Legacy sometimes, but I'm glad to hear your monthlies are firing and sound pretty great in terms of turnout. Any last words? Anything you'd like to pass on to someone looking to play this deck, pick up this deck, look to transfer from Naya potentially?
Yeah, I think just try the deck out. It's super fun. It's super interesting. You learn something new every match you play. And props for the Depths Discord. They've always have great discussions. And
Yeah, very
thanks
active.
for having me.
No, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend. And to those who are watching this and playing in Eternal Weekend, good luck at Eternal Weekend, especially if you're going to be playing Depths. Cheers.